privileged to be standing in front of you today to switch on the spotlight on Ethiopia, and specifically on the energy sector of Ethiopia as a whole. I've entitled my presentation, Ethiopia, a regional powerhouse in the making. So, a brief presentation on Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a country with over 100 million people living in it, and it's known for its abundance of renewable energy resources, renewable energy potential. If you want to quantify that in terms of numbers, a lot of studies have been made in terms of the potential of renewable energy utilization within the country. And if we look at for instance, the hydropower sector, studies show that there's about more than 45 gigawatt worth of energy that can be generated through hydropower throughout the country. If you look at wind, the numbers are even bigger, with 1,300 gigawatt worth of power plants can be constructed using wind sources. If we look at the geothermal sector, the studies show that you can actually generate up to 10 gigawatts. Solar, also a very abundant resource where even utility scale projects can be developed easily and can generate a lot of electricity. While saying that, if we look at what is available and what has been developed, we can see that less than 10% of hydro resources have been used. Wind and geothermal, even though they're existing utility scale projects, there's still a lot to be done in terms of available resources within the country. Solar, there had not been any utility scale projects developed yet, so it's also something big. And we're going to have a look at each of these sectors during my presentation, and looking at what are the projects on the pipeline and what are the projects prospected until 2025, to show you how things are shifting and to show you also how what I mean by a regional and a continental powerhouse that Ethiopia is leaning towards. So we have on one end the resources that are being underutilized. There's also intensive studies that actually were conducted to forecast the power demand within the country, and these power demand within the country alone is being increasing by 25% every year, and forecasts have been made until 2037. So there is a high increasing demand within the country, and there is high available resources. So it's very, intuitive to say that with the resource available, Ethiopia is capable of not only, if it's get properly invested, not only generate enough power for the country, but also have enough to export to the neighboring countries. Only 4.2 gigawatt have been actually utilized so far, so there's a lot to be done in the coming years. Ethiopia is very strategically placed since it shares its borders with Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, North Sudan, South Sudan, and Kenya. And there have been intensive also prospective projects, and some projects have already been started, and towards creating high voltage transmission line to neighboring countries. The transmission line between Ethiopia and Kenya has already reached a good amount of progress, but until 2025, it's planned by the government to construct over 10,000 kilometers of high voltage line in total. With over 115 new substations are also planned to be constructed before 2025, and a lot of work, above 60 existing substations are planned to be rehabilitated or upgraded. And this is a very big opening for at least construction and EPC companies to come in and do and try to tackle these projects. This is something to look at, and once this is done, this is certainly going to make Ethiopia as a regional exporter, specifically because of its location. Now let's take the time to take snapshots of different subsectors that I have stated in my second slide, in order to see what are actually the existing projects and the projects planned. So let's start by the hydropower sector. With the available resource, 45 gigawatt, is actually represents about 20% of feasible hydropower plant projects within Africa are found in Ethiopia. This is something that is interesting to see. Yet only 13 hydropower plants have been constructed in the country, generating up to 3.8 gigawatts. From the 13, actually, one doesn't work. So 12 actually running power plants. So you can see how the potential and what has been constructed is still very far. But looking at that, and throughout my presentation, I'll be talking about projects that are in the pipeline and projects that are being constructed until 2020, 2025. All this is actually driven by what we call the Growth and Transformation Plan, which is like the train that is driving the Ethiopian economy. Every project that are being developed follow these GTPs. They're 5-year plans. We're now in the second phase of this GTP. The first one ended in 2015. Second one is going to end in 2020. So clear plans in all economy sectors have been laid out by the government. And projects, if projects are developed, they have to be aligned with this. So according to the GTP for 2020 and the overall master plan of the country's investment plans, there have been a lot of studies that were done in order to identify very feasible hydropower plants, and targets show that at least 14 additional hydropowers are scheduled to be constructed before 2025, capable of generating a total power of 11 gigawatts. So these are big-scale projects, and the government is now really going back and not more accepting concessional loans, and will be actually giving projects as an EPC contract, because, well, you have to pay the money back at a certain point, and they're turning all the generation projects towards independent power producers. That's the new thing now. Most of the projects, even the hydro power plants, especially the new ones that are going to come up, the 14 additional ones that are coming up before 2025, are going to be in independent power producer format, where private sector is coming, building the plants and then selling the power to the government. If we look at only the projects that have started and that are on the pipeline for this year, I don't know if you heard about the Grand Renaissance Dam, which is one of the biggest hydropower plants that are being constructed within Ethiopia, capable of generating 6.45 gigawatt of electricity. That construction has now reached a bit around 60%. So the construction will go on within this calendar year. The Ganale Dawa 3, which is a big hydropower plant as well, with 254 megawatt, that is almost complete. So it's definitely would probably start, will be online at the end of this year. A smaller project is being also done by the power company, 7 megawatt Abasamo, which is almost complete. And then the government is going to embark now on the second giant after the Great Renaissance Dam, which is the Koisha hydropower plant, capable of creating 2.1 gigawatts. So a lot of work has been done for this, and the project is on procurement process, but at the end of this year, it will definitely at least initiate some of their construction. Let's take the snapshot of the wind power section now. Wind, biggest potential in the country. 1,300 gigawatt worth of energy can be produced. Yet only 3 projects have been running so far, with a total of about 324 megawatt capacity, generation capacity. Again, also the wind sector, the government is now turning, all these projects have been done as an EPC contract, but now they're turning towards IPP projects. So most of the projects that are coming up now are going to be in IPP format, except maybe for the Aisha project, which has been initiated, which is a 120 megawatt power plant that has been contracted, and the construction has started. But there's an additional 9 additional wind farms that already been identified and ready to be out for tender for independent power producers until 2025, capable of generating about 1.5 gigawatt of electricity by 2025. Huge ambition again. The solar power, very big opportunity, yet on a utility scale basis, nothing has been done so far. But new trends is happening. The first independent power IPP open tender was actually a solar project of 100 megawatts it's called Matara Solar Project. And that is almost, the procurement process of that is almost finished. Final negotiations are underway. So we might have the implementation of the first IPP project very soon. That is underway. Another thing is 2 projects are also under procurement process, which is a total of 250 megawatt utility scale solar projects, also open for IPP project developers, and it's also under procurement process. This is a project that is also backed by the IFC. In terms of national other projects that are planned before 2025, about 5, in total 5 solar farms are at least planned to be started or finished before 2025, with a total capacity of 550 megawatt. Geothermal, on the other end, 10 gigawatt, like I said, worth of power that can be generated, huge geothermal energy project potential, yet there's only one plant that is currently out there, and it's not even working well, a 7.3 megawatt. But on the other end, when we look at the projects that are under the pipeline, we can state what we call the Corbetti project, which is a total of 1,000 megawatt of geothermal energy geothermal plant that is actually being followed as the first IPP, because it was not an open tender, but it was the first IPP project that was launched many years back, but it's still under negotiation. But finally, we're seeing lights where it's actually going somewhere. So that, at least the first phase, 500 megawatt, is supposed to start very soon. So now it's only final power purchase agreement negotiations that is left. But even though it's not an open tender, it's soon going to start. But on the other end, there are other works that have started other than this project. The Aluto geothermal project, capable of generating 75 megawatt. This procurement is underway now, and it's supposed to end. At least the procurement phase is supposed to end in 2018, which means by next year the construction is going to start. And 3 additional very promising sites have been identified and scheduled to be also out for tender for independent power producers before 2025, capable of generating above 500 megawatts. Finally, the biomass. Now that's something very interesting as well to see. The first waste to energy plant in Africa is actually now above 95% completed. The construction is almost completed. It's almost up and running and capable of generating 50 megawatt of power using Addis Ababa waste in general. So that's a project that is quite popular. But even though the study, no specific studies have been done yet, that means identification of exact sites. There is a target of actually also being open for investment in the biomass sector, especially because this one is going to be operational, and they've seen that this can work, and they've targeted. The government has targeted about 400 megawatt of power to be generated in this with this type of format. So I only talked about the generation, utility scale generation so far, but there is a lot of also potential, very hot potential for rehabilitation projects. A lot of power plants are now being a lot of procurements are being given for upgrading and rehabilitation of existing power plants or substations, and there's a lot of need for the private sector to get involved in that aspect. For consultancy business, also there's an opening of a lot of project studies to be conducted. As you can see, all these projections and all these plans, etc., it's because these project feasibility have been made, and they want to continue working on that. So giving to the private sector also big scale project feasibility studies, and they've targeted about the capacity of 10 gigawatt worth of project feasibility study to be done in all sectors within the country. So that's also an opportunity to look at closely. A lot of work is being done also to decrease the power losses within the transmission and distribution line. That's also something towards energy efficiency businesses within the country. Since one of the biggest problems within the country is a foreign exchange access, foreign currency access within the country. So especially if these big projects, utilities projects are being planned, there's a high need for the government to push companies or manufacturers to actually start implementing or constructing their plants within Ethiopia, so that they are capable of creating items for generation, transmission, distribution within the country, because the market is already there for these big utility scale projects. So they want to push more manufacturers to come in and manufacture within the country to supply all these targeted companies. So it's easier now for the private sector to actually win projects, and there will be less hustle with getting the foreign currencies. And with all the industrial parks that are being constructed within the country, there's a lot of power supply work that is just waiting to happen, because the industrial parks are constructed, but there's no power yet. So there's a lot of really urgent work that needs to be done. To finalize my presentation, and because it's unfair to look at the on-grid sector, so this will be good to have a snapshot on the off-grid sector as well, to see that, to show you that the studies and the targets are also made for to open the opportunity for the off-grid sector. And the reason for that is, even if there is 100% geographical grid access, which means that the government can construct the grid line as much as it can, there is also a lot of areas that would never be addressed by the grid. If you just look at the numbers, 60% of the grid line has been constructed, but if you look at household level, only 20-25% of households have access to electricity. So there is a high need for the government to give a priority for the off-grid sector as well, and these can be seen with numbers. So what I'm presenting you here is the ones that have been identified by the government. Numbers have been set within the GTP that I was talking about, the first GTP and the second GTP. In terms of the off-grid sector, can be classified into 4, at least what the government has targeted. And the solar off-grid, we have the solar home systems, the solar lanterns, and the solar system for institutions. And if you look at the targets, even the targets, the previous targets and the new targets, and what have been done by the private sector or by any sector, is the numbers are still very far. But the sites have been identified. The will for the government to do these projects is also there. If you look at mini-grid sites, there has been a lot of money that was spent just to identify sites. And with the actual GTP, about 105 sites have already been identified, waiting for further development. There's a high demand for usage of renewable energy for pumping purposes. Again, what has been implemented so far is still far from being being actually compatible with the targets for the government. Biogas digesters has been something that is quite popular now, especially if we look at the numbers of projects that have been implemented, but still, again, a lot of room for that as well. So just to finish my presentation, I just want to say, so we've seen the potential, we've seen the targets for both for off-grid and for on-grid, and I just want to say that it's really, especially now, especially with the new legislation that are coming out with public-private partnership, defending laws, it's high time to open your ears, open your eyes, and have a close look at what's happening in Ethiopia, because it's definitely going to be a real powerhouse within the region. With that, I thank you for your attention.